Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad to have you all here in this wonderful group, in this amazing tribe that's so loving and kind towards each other. Really, today I'm going to be talking about approaching institutions and offices for art sales. But you know what I always think of every day as I'm answering questions here is the support that's here in this group. When I see you all answering each other's questions and giving thumbs up, likes, love, it's great to see, because I think it's enormously important for artists to have support for everything that you're doing in these groups, right? You're trying to find galleries, apply for residencies, grants, reach out to different places, raise money. It takes support to do those things, I think, because they're not easy. They're not easy because success is often not easy to handle. I was just talking to an artist the other day who said he met a gallerist, and the gallerist said to him, yeah, send me your work. It sounds really interesting. And he showed him a few images. He said, send me more. And he said, I'm really nervous to send the gallerist some work. So, he's nervous because getting what we want is often a little scarier than we thought, right? It carries a certain amount of responsibility with it. So I'm just prefacing this talk with it because what I think is really important in this group, in this tribe of artists, is the support you're all giving to each other. And what I mean exactly is the comments you're making on each other's posts in here is huge. It's enormously important. I see other artists reacting to it, saying, wow, I can't believe so many people are reacting to my post. Thank you. And a dialogue starts, a community starts. So thank you all for the love you're sharing with each other in this group, in this tribe, because that's everything. That's how we get to do things that are difficult. That's how we get to do things that are exciting, so exciting that they're scary, right? So, okay, I'm going to talk today about approaching institutions and offices for art sales. And I'm going to answer questions at the end, of course. If you're not seeing this live, you can still ask questions. So here we go. The topic is, you walk into an office building or you go into a hospital and you see art all over the place and you wonder, how did that art get here? How does my art get in here? And I'll tell you exactly how that happens. There are consultants that do some of that, but the way to get your work in these places isn't to pursue the consultants, because the consultants go from job to job, right? Maybe they have a job with a hospital, or maybe they have a job with an office building or something like that, but it's usually limited in scope. So they're right on to the next thing. And I can talk a little bit more about that, but let me get right into how you make a sale to a hospital, to an office building, to a building where you see a lot of art in public spaces and you think, wow, my art would look great in there. And it is a great way to get sales of art and also art into the public sphere. So to begin with, hospitals is a good one to talk about, right? We go to a hospital and there's tons of walls. There's usually tons of art all over the place. And hospitals realize more and more it's important for them to have art. It makes people feel good. Art's great to have around. Art's great for hospitals to see, for patients to see in the hospitals. So to begin with a hospital, this is a method that that was used by a woman named Vicky Da Silva, who used this method and sold her work to a number of hospitals. And it takes a little persistence and a little bit of hustle. And here's how it works. You walk into a hospital, you see the work on the walls, and you go to the front desk and you say, who's responsible for the work on the walls? And usually they'll say, God. I don't know. Say, who would know? Who would know who's responsible for that? And in all cases, there's a little bit of a, calling one person to call another person, but it shouldn't be that long in an institution like a hospital to find out who's in control of the art that goes on the wall. And you may think, oh, it's a curator or it's a consultant, but they all have different names for who it is that's managing the art that's on the walls. And that means who's purchasing it, who's acquiring the art, and who's hanging the art. And in some cases, the person that is if you go into a hospital, this woman who was also a student in the course, Vicky De Silva, she said it was the furniture person. You know, that's who they referred her to, called furniture. And furniture didn't mean just furniture. It meant anything that wasn't like screwed to the walls or nailed to the floor in a hospital. There was one person in charge of furniture, and that meant the art too. So you go to that person, as Vicky did, and said, hey, I'm an artist, I'm local, I think this work would be beautiful in here. How do I get it on the walls? I'd like you guys to have it. You know, it's not so expensive. These are $2,000 a piece or whatever they were. And she got work into hospitals that way. So that's really the method, right? And you go to another office building or another hospital, and you make it a different answer, that it's not the furniture person, or it's or they have their own curator, or they say, oh, a consultant did that for us. Can you tell me which consultant did that for you? You know, just who did it, right? Who is the one that asked that, you know? You know, I think it's such an important question, right? To say, you know, when someone says, oh, I don't know who did that, you know, who would know who did that, right? That's really important. I mean, not to bring in politics too much, but you know, Ms. Cortez, who you probably saw questioning Michael Cohen about the president. You know, her questioning was kind of brilliant. You know, I think she's an amazing woman, but her questioning was also brilliant, because when he would say, gee, I don't know who has those papers, she said, who would know who has those papers? Or if he says, I wasn't around at that time, I have no idea what happened then, she said, who would know what would happen then? Who could we write to, or who would know, who would be responsible for that? And just rattled off the names. So, you know, such an important line of questioning, right? Instead of when someone says, I don't know, you know, who's responsible for that, then ask, who would know who is responsible for that? And there is a person there that would definitely know. So, so that's the line of questioning when coming into a hospital or an office building. And so sometimes you'll find they may have a curator there. Sometimes you'll find it's a consultant. Sometimes you'll find it's somebody else with a different name, or that it's one person in particular in the hospital that manages the art on the walls or the office building. So if you get the name of a consultant, if they say, oh, you know, that was, you know, Bronwyn and Bronwyn Consultants or something, then you can look up that consultant. You can say, do you have a contact for that consultant? Because I'd like to show them some art that I think would work well in this hospital. And it's not that the hospital or office building is full of art, right? There's always room for more art in there. Art comes down, it changes, they rebuild certain rooms or offices. So contact the consultant. If they don't give you a contact for the consultant and just a name, it should be easy enough to find. Now, office buildings are the same issue. You know, you'll go into an office building that's like, I don't know, a corporate lobby or something like that. And sometimes you'll find in corporate lobbies, they'll say, oh yes, such and such a consultant agency organizes these shows for us. And then you can call that agency, and in some cases, in corporate lobbies, they're bringing in and out art on a regular basis. They're changing shows on a regular basis. And the corporation pays them not to buy art and hang it on the walls, but to basically mount shows in their lobby areas of art. And you can ask the same thing there. Who's responsible for this you know, installation here? Who's responsible for the work in here? And they'll tell you who's responsible. It's easy enough to find out. There's no reason they should hide that information. This isn't a kind of situation where they're holding their cards close to their chest. It doesn't make sense. You're simply asking a question about who produced the installation in this corporation, who assembled this grouping of art. And they'll tell you, either they bought it, it's either from the corporation's collection, which I'll tell you about in a little bit too, or it's from a consultant, a curator who is managing their lobby and puts together these shows. And then you can write to the curator. You can ask them who the curator is. They're proud of who the curator is. You know, if someone's asking, who knows, you may write an article about it. Not that you have to, you know, pose as a journalist or anything, but it's a fair enough question, and they'd be proud to answer it because they're proud of the work that's in their lobby. Another thing a corporation could say is, this is from our own personal collection. You know, we rotate our collection. Or you could reach the person who eventually says, that's just our collection that's rotated. And then you can say, can I ask who acquires work for the corporation? Who do you work through to go about that process? And very often they have a curator that does that process for them, that acquires the art in the corporation, and consults with them about how the art is hung in the corporation. So so that's a great question to ask too, because as you go from different offices, and I would do this locally, you know, again, hospitals, office buildings, corporate offices, apartment buildings, sometimes condominiums, you know, you see art on the walls. There's someone that's in charge of that, because all that work has to be taken care of. And in most cases, it's insured. It's not that in apartment buildings or condos, or it's certainly rare to have the case that people are just hanging up whatever art they want in the hallways. It's managed by a community board, and that community board has someone who is in charge of what art goes up and what doesn't. So again, ask. It's you get everywhere asking in this world. I believe it's just extraordinary what happens when you ask, who's responsible for this? And so again, just to reiterate, for those who may have come on late to this live talk, and if you're seeing it recorded, of course, you can still ask questions, you know, in this wonderful group at Praxis Center. But essentially, if you want to sell work to hospitals, corporations, corporate lobbies, office buildings, and you see the work in there, there should be something that's local to you, right? That a hospital you've gone into, or an office building locally that you've gone into regularly. Then just simply go in there and ask, who's responsible for the art on the walls? I'm interested. I'm an artist and I want to know. And they'll tell you. And if they don't tell you, again, as I was saying earlier, then ask who is responsible, or how would I find out the name of the person who is responsible? And it should be easy enough to get to that person. And that person is either a consultant, a curator, an in-house curator, or someone who's part of the staff and is managing what's going on. More or less, those are the options. Then reach out to that person, ask how to reach them, and they'll either tell you how to reach them, or in most cases, because they're proud of what's on the walls, there's no reason why they wouldn't give out that contact. You're a local artist and you're interested in also having work on the walls. If you can't get the address or the email of the consultant or the curator, just the name will be enough to give you that answer. You type in that name to Google, and the hospital or the corporation or the office building or the apartment building, and you'll get it. So so those are the main points I want to cover today in terms of making sales to corporations and office buildings. As I was saying a little later in the talk, just before, because I'm kind of summarizing it now, if you go into a corporation and they have a lobby where the art's always changing and there's interesting installations in there, or films, projections, videos, you can ask them again the same question, and they may have a consultant or curator that works with them. In that case, they don't own the art, because when I'm talking about asking offices and hospitals, in almost all those cases, they own the art. They bought the art. So when you want to be in that hospital or that corporation, you're asking, how does my art get bought by this hospital? And don't offer to give your art to the hospital or corporation, because in most cases, they value that a little bit less. It's the same with museums, which this isn't a talk about now, but I will. If you offer to donate work to a museum, that's still not attractive to them because they either want to buy it or they don't. Same with a hospital and an office building. They'd rather buy it and own it than feel like, you know, they have a donation on their hands that maybe they have to return, because the process is still the same. It's a bureaucratic process in almost all cases. A committee meets, decides, do we like this art? Do we want to acquire it? It's only $2,000 a piece or whatever it is. I think we can get 5 works of this. It would, you know, be uplifting here. Again, the other instance that's a little bit different is in a corporate lobby. If shows are coming in and out and they say a curator is doing this or a consultant is doing this, then you can contact that consultant because they're paying the consultant something or the curator to mount these shows. And so they're not buying the art in that case. And this is unusual, but corporations do it. I mean, it's not unusual, but it's something you see more and more, but probably when you go to hospitals and other places, that's not what's happening in most cases. It's permanent work on the walls. But in the case that, you know, a corporation is having shows that are curated by a consultant, then in that case, talk to the consultant and they should hire you or pay you to do a proposal or to use your work. It shouldn't be free because those consultants are being paid by the corporation to mount those shows. So, so I hope that's clear. If you have any questions, you can ask, and I'm here to answer them. So I want to say, yeah, hello, Doreen. Hello, Bill. Hello, Barbara. Hello, Kristen. Good morning. Good morning. And Diane, wonderful to have you here. Doreen. Public or private hospitals, Lou? Either. Either will work. Good question. But either. Private hospitals also have a budget for this kind of thing. They have a budget for making the place look good. And it's not a question of what their budget is. It's a question of who's managing that, who's acquiring the art. So again, private or public spaces, this both works for. That's why, you know, apartment condominiums or office buildings, which of course are privately owned, would be the same. Judy, you're so welcome. So Kathleen says, who to ask? How would I find the person responsible for the art on the walls if they say they have no ideas, which happens a lot? What's the next step? Well, as I was saying before, the next step is to say, who would have an idea? Who would know? You know, you just follow things that way. Again, I was quoting Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who was saying in a congressional hearing when she was questioning Cohen. I don't know if you guys saw this, but just kind of a brilliant line of questioning, as opposed to what other Congress people were doing. Whenever he said, I don't know, she said, well, who would know? Who would have the answer to that question? And there's an answer to that. So there's definitely an answer to that question, Kathleen. So if someone asks, simply ask, well, then if they say, I don't know, you know, nobody knows. Someone knows for sure. Because if the art was damaged, for example, the person who was responsible for putting it up there, you know, would know. Someone would know. The hospital would know. They'd know who to talk to about that. So again, if they say they don't know, ask who would know. Easy enough to follow that trail. Scarlett says, and what about offices under construction? How to get in at the beginning? Okay, offices under construction. This is a different issue, and I could probably do a whole nother video on that. But offices under construction, buildings under construction, that would all go through Percent for Arts programs in the United States. So what, and there may be a different program in Europe for that. I don't think there is a Percent for Arts in Europe the way there is in the United States. So in the United States, when a public building is built, like a school or a hospital, a public hospital, 1% of the construction funds has to go towards art. that's a decent amount of money. $1 million building is 100,000 in art, right? 2,000,000, 200,000. It's a lot of money that can go towards art. That's how you sometimes see these kind of murals, these sort of reliefs on buildings. So the way to get involved with that is to whatever state you're in the United States, and you can also check this out in Canada and Europe, Spain, everywhere. Find out in the United States, it's called the Percent for Arts. So you can find out in your state what is the Arkansas Percent for Arts program. Type that in, you'll find it, the New York Percent for Arts. And usually what you have to do there is register with them. You register on the Percent for Arts program, and that means you give them a certain amount of images, a resume, and when an architect's about to build a building, they go to the Percent for Arts archive, and they begin looking through the artists that are there that say they do this kind of work. And often that's commissioned work. But a lot of times it's also filling the building with work. Again, this is like before it's built, and there's a lot of different ways that people work with this. A lot of times architects spend all that money, that 200,000 they have in art, they spend it all on a kind of elaborate wall relief that you could propose and potentially have installed and get paid for. I'll probably do a separate talk on that because that's a whole nother issue. Monica Bravo did a talk about that for this group. She did a lot of public installations in subways and all over the place, and she talked about how she just applied to the Percent for Arts program, that there were artists there that were more qualified than her in many cases, but she's done some amazing installations in New York subways and other public venues because her proposal was good and they felt that she could execute it. And that's a huge issue when dealing with architects and planning boards and the people who are about to give you this commission is, can you execute it? If you're about to do a mosaic that's in mural on the side of an office building, or you're going to interpret your art in some other fashion on the side of a building, they want to know, do you know how to manufacture this? Do you have someone that you're working with already? Can you do this? The artists that don't get the commissions are the one that say no, but I'm sure I could figure it out. You want to know what your ability is to do that, and that's not that hard to find out. There's fabricators that do that kind of thing on a regular basis, so you can simply research them. That was probably a little too much for that answer, right? Okay, Diane, how do I go about making a monumental sculpture for Corporate Plaza, indoors or outdoors? I have this sculpture already created. I want to make it monumental size and sell it. Okay, good question, Diane. You work with a fabricator. So, first, of course, you have to get the commission. So, Diane, if you were registered with a Florida Percent for Arts, which there is a commission like that, find out how you register with them, what they need from you. And what they need from you is, resume, a bio, something like that. They all have slightly different kind of requirements for what they need. And then, if you are chosen to give a proposal, you'd have to say, okay, I have something that'll fit that building. And I have a maquette of the sculpture, but I'm going to make it huge on the side. You have to know how you're going to make it and explain that to the committee and how you're going to be sure that it's secured to the building. So the best way to do it is to look up fabricators. There's architectural fabricators that are probably local to you that you can simply look up. And they fabricate things. When artists making monumental sculpture, in almost all cases, they're working with fabricators. They have a maquette, a model, and the fabricator tells them not only how it's going to come together, because they can not only make it, but they're also going to make it probably in pieces and ship it and assemble it. So it's very different than making a small sculpture. Oftentimes, small sculptures don't look anything like what the final piece is, because it has to be scaled up in a different material, assembled together somehow. So again, Diane, to answer your question, It's to find a fabricator that's local to you. And were you to work with a percent for arts, you'll also you'll know the architect of the building. Architects sometimes know fabricators, but they're going to want to know what's happening with the materials and how this will interact with the building, how it'll be anchored to the building. So that's something that a fabricator will know also more about in terms of working with architects. And at some point, you'll also have a conversation with the architect. So let's see. Kathleen says, if I can sell a piece to a corporation and I'm currently represented by a private gallery, do I give a commission to my gallery? No, not unless the gallery has an exclusive on you. And very, very rarely do they have an exclusive. You're doing public art. If you do commissions for public art, has nothing to do with your gallery. You know, there's the issue of if you sell out of your studio while you're having a show with that gallery. And some of that work is, you know, maybe some of those collectors found out about you through the gallery. Then I think you can see ethically, yeah, the gallery should get something, you know, depending on what you work out with them. But for a public commission, absolutely not. Has nothing to do with the gallery. And Kip, yes, hotels fall under this. So same thing. You can walk into a hotel and you can say, who's responsible for the work on the wall? It's that simple. And then follow up. Follow up, follow up. There's someone in that hotel that's responsible. And oftentimes people are fairly naive about what they install. I mean, sometimes the person in a hotel that's responsible for, let's say, the art that's on the walls is really the person that does the, you know, interior decorating or maintenance of I don't know, some aspect of the building. So art isn't actually their forte. It's not really what they do. So to come in there and give them show them some interest and give them some help, because maybe they have like prints in the room that don't look very good or things aren't framed well. You can point this out to them and say, I can do a better job here than that. So hotels, great. Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. Leslie, a mall would be the same thing. Absolutely. Malls are privately owned. There's an owner to that mall who's interested, right? Your work could look great in there. And what they're also going to want to know is, and this is an important aspect of a mall because it's a public place, can people touch it? Will it make people feel good? Will it be fun? And so part of your pitch to the mall or very public places like that, if they have a place to site a sculpture is, and you can even say, you know, I'd like to do a temporary installation and, you know, this is what it'll cost you. Because oftentimes people don't want to commit to a permanent installation of a major sculpture unless it is a kind of a percent for arts thing where you're building it in with a building. So what you can say to them is you want to build a case for it a little bit, Leslie. So if it's a piece they can touch, if it's a piece that's kind of fun, then that's that much more attractive. I mean, I don't know if you know the work of Tom Otterness. He has bronze sculptures all over New York City. And a lot of people feel differently about them, but basically they're little creatures that look kind of like fun. They're made out of bronze. You can touch them all. So it adds a kind of lightness, a buoyancy to the city. And that's a good part of, I'm sure it was a good part of his pitch. And it's a good part of probably why he continues to get commissions like that, because it's accessible, it's fun, it's understandable. Kids can like it, kids can touch it, parents can like it. So in a mall environment, that is an important consideration. Okay, so Lou, can we apply to big building constructions? Public hospitals here don't have money even for staff. Even if they don't have money for staff, you'd be surprised what they have for construction and help. I mean, obviously, if an institute is really poor and they have no money, you know, that's a problem. They're not going to have money to buy work. But most hospitals, most institutions do. If the hospital really doesn't have money, look at a corporate lobby. Look at other lobbies, buildings, institutions that do have money. Yes, Diane, percentage for arts program. That is what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'll find some and put some links in here too. Um, yeah, and Leslie saying, I was replying to Marcia, I'm from New York City and I have both realistic and abstract in corporate buildings. Yeah, in corporate buildings, maybe I missed that question. There is both realistic and abstract art. There's no content restriction, but of course these are in public places, right? So very disturbing art is rarely shown. You don't see it, right? When was the last time you saw something kind of disturbing in a public place? You don't see that. You tend to see things that are accessible to the public. Sometimes you have monuments to war, to the Holocaust, or something like that, that are kind of places of reverence, of prayer. You know, there are monuments to 9/11, of course, like that. But generally, what you see in public places is work that, whether it's abstract or figurative, is somehow uplifting, is somehow accessible, is at the very least not disturbing. Okay, let's see. Yes, Sasha, I believe you can apply to Percent for Arts in cities other than our own. They all have different programs. A lot of them like to support kind of their own artists. That doesn't mean you can't apply to them. So by all means, you know, pursue Percent for Art programs, not only in your own state, which there should be plenty of, but also in other states. Ask them. It doesn't hurt to ask. I'll put links to those programs. Let's see, Leslie. Not the sculptor who asked you, but good to know the distinction that falls under private ownership, right? And Lou says, I mean, corporations who build buildings, maybe apartments, or places to live in. Yeah, absolutely. Apartments, places to live in, Lou. Those are all great places to work with. You could, you know, I believe you're in Spain, right? So you can find out how artists work. Call the Ministry of Culture, you know, your Ministry of Culture. They'll know. Call state officials. Keep asking, who's responsible for art in public places? Is there a program for art in public places in Spain or wherever you are in the world? Because there almost always is. And a lot of times the programs are about temporary works of sculpture, because it's a lot for a city, a town, a state to commit to something permanent. So a lot of times there are ways of even proposing. Like I remember there was in New York City, there was a statue of Andy Warhol near, that's no longer there, but it was near Union Square where his factory was. And there was no Percent for Arts program. There was no New York program for that. That artist simply went, I believe it was Rob Pruitt, that artist went to the New York City Town Hall and said, I have a proposal for you. I'd like to put, you know, this sculpture of Andy Warhol, you know, here, you know, in the middle of the road, in a kind of a, you know, I don't know, a midway in the road, and it's temporary. You know, it'll be up for 6 months, and I'll raise the funds to put that up. And he had to assure them that it couldn't fall over, wouldn't be damaged. You know, if it was graffitied on, it could be washed off. They have all those kinds of concerns. You know, this is the same way. So that's going right to City Hall, or in Spain or anywhere else, right to planning boards that control the streets, which you can find out all about in your local town government by asking questions. But they always have public meetings, and you can propose things. That's how Christo and the late John Claude did all their work. You know, nobody paid for that work. The city didn't pay for that in Central Park or in Italy or in anywhere else where they did it. They would go there, and one by one they talk to people, and they say, will you, we want to install this piece here. We're paying for everything. We're paying for it all. We're not asking you for any money. We'll cover insurance, but this is what we want to do. And you can imagine, in the case of Christo and John Claude, even though they're well known, a lot of raised eyebrows. Oh, really? You want to do that here? What's in it for us? You know, and what's in it for them just like the Andy Warhol sculpture is, you know, it's a moment that people photograph, tourists like it, they flock to it, it'll help with tourism and profile for the city or country. And New York City needs that, believe it or not, and is attracted to that, just as other countries are attracted to that. So, so that's I hope that's helpful, because that's a great way to do it. And you know, it's not that Christo and Jean-Claude, because I knew them both and still know Christo, it's not that they had someone do this for them or they paid people to do it. When they tell a story about when they wanted to wrap the Reichstag, and they said to them, to the government, we'd like to wrap the Reichstag, whoever they talked to, and so they were told, sure, that's possible, but you'd have to convince every member in Parliament to vote for that somehow. And he said, well, how would we convince them? And he said, well, you could begin by talking to them. Christo said, we began to talk to people in the Parliament, and they said, well, we represent, obviously, the people in our district. So if you're interested in doing this, you don't need permission just from me. You need all the people in my district to also approve this. So I know this is really ambitious, but what Christo and Jean-Claude did was they went to every single district all over Germany, and they spoke at schools, they spoke at all kinds of public venues, art centers, cultural centers, places where, there weren't the arts, to explain why they wanted to do the incredibly strange project of wrapping the Reichstag. And, this is all on their own dime. It was about conversation. And so they said, we need you all to vote for this. Tell your member in Parliament to vote for this. And, the story is they got it done after, hundreds of hours of lectures. Not saying you should do that, of course. It could be much easier. Like the guy who I believe was Rob Pruitt, who put up the Andy Warhol sculpture in New York City, just petitioning once. When Christo and Jean-Claude, although that did take a long time too, to do the gates in Central Park, that was a massive project. And the first time they proposed it, I don't know if you know, the city said, thanks a lot. No thanks, we're not interested. They proposed it again 20 years later, and it went through that time, partly because they had a mayor, Michael Bloomberg, that was more of a proponent for the arts. So that's a super ambitious, project, of course, but it shows that you can get through anything. And it wasn't Christo's fame that was carrying it, because most people don't know who Christo is. When all the members of Parliament had convinced everybody, they didn't know who he was. Artists and some collectors know who he is, but people who are working all kinds of other jobs other than the arts don't know who he is. So let's see if there's more questions here. Kathleen, what about asking colleges and universities about buying art? Do academic environments have budgets to purchase art? Do you have to be an alum? Good question. Sometimes it helps to be an alum there, but you can ask, like anywhere else, like in all these other venues, who's in charge of acquiring art for the college? And they may say, well, we're not acquiring art right now. Our buildings are filled with it. We commissioned a piece of public art last year, but we're not doing anything more now. Then you can ask, well, I wanted to propose a piece of public art. Would there be a possibility for that? And usually the way it works with a university, what I've experienced and heard about, is if you want to propose a piece of public art to the university, there's usually one of their trustees that's going to underwrite that specifically, because most of the university's money is going to other things. But ask, by all means. They do have funds for it. Different universities, depending on what they are, whether they're Ivy Leagues or smaller universities, private, public, have different ways of accessing different types of funds. And states often give grants to different universities just for acquiring art. So it's a case-by-case basis. Let's see, seen a huge amount of prints in public buildings. Do you think we should still pursue the person who does that for the buildings? Absolutely. Absolutely. There is a lot of prints. That's how they're getting away with spending less. $2,000 a print adds up when you're putting 100 of them in a big building. Absolutely. You have to find out who it is that's acquiring those prints and hanging them. Let's see. Interior decorators, says Marcia. Different world altogether. Interior decorators work on a case-by-case basis, and obviously, if you want to sell to interior decorators, I should really do a separate talk on that, because that's really a separate issue. Interior decorators work on project to project. So let's say you are an interior decorator, then you have a job with, you know, 2 fairly wealthy homes, 1 office, and I don't know, a corporation. Interior decorators may or may not consult on the art when they're doing a home or an office. Very often, art is the one thing they don't touch. So some of them do. However, you have to remember that they're going on a project-to-project basis. So some of it, you can be in touch with them, and you can certainly introduce yourself to interior designers. But first, you need to ask them, do you work with artists? And if they do, okay, how do you work with artists? And they'll say, well, you know, send us your work, and if a project comes up, we'll let you know if we're interested. And then if a project comes up in a home that they're interested in, and the home wants also art too, that's how they have a you know, a list of artists that are sending them work, and you can work with them that way, one by one. I would start locally, because you want to meet them. Okay, Lori, does it have to be the original art, or could you offer them prints? Also, what about asking a business like a restaurant to hang your work with a price on it for sale? Yeah, that's another world also altogether. It doesn't have to be original art. It could absolutely be prints in office buildings and other places. Restaurants, art with a price tag on it. I'm not a big fan of that, for a few reasons. One, they're usually not paying you for that, right? Because restaurants in most cases aren't making a lot of money. It's a little bit of a dangerous place. People can splash something on it, you know. A price tag hanging from it, I think it's far and few between artworks that sell that way, because no one in the restaurant is going to close the sale on that artwork in most cases. So you can certainly ask restaurants. People do that, cafes everywhere. But in terms of getting paid for that, you probably won't get paid. Hanging a price tag on it, I feel pretty strongly that that's not the best way to sell or represent your art, because you probably won't make a sale from that. Someone won't close the sale. So, I prefer to stay with places that are going to really value your art because they bought it from you, or they're paying you to put it up there. And restaurants tend not to do that. If a restaurant does want to buy your work, fantastic. But just hanging it with a price tag, I'd caution against that, because of damage, and also because it's just going to cost you money to do, and very unlikely that a sale will be closed that way. Let's see, Kathleen, I used to know an interior decorator in Vermont years ago who liked my smaller work and kept buying frame pieces to place in her clients' homes and businesses. It was cool. Yeah, so there you go. So Kathleen saying, you know, she had a relationship with one interior designer who was placing smaller works of hers in homes, and that worked out really well. You know, she had a relationship with Kathleen, liked her work. She probably wasn't working with a lot of other artists, I guess. Liked Kathleen's work, kept working with her, built a relationship, trusted Kathleen, knew she could deliver the work. That's how that works. Yeah, and Leslie, yeah, nothing of Christo and Jean-Claude's were sponsored in any way. Just to tell you a little more about that, glad you're interested. Christo always said, I was born behind the Iron Curtain. I don't want anybody controlling anything I do in any way. So he said, even the gates, you know, people would offer to buy them from him. He said, no, they're all getting destroyed in the end. I don't want anything being, you know, sold or resold or used in another way. He said, you know, we could have had a fabric company sponsor this. He said, but what if the fabric company was sponsoring it, and they said, and we said to them, you know, we don't like the seam over here because these pieces are, you know, are really wide. And the fabric company said, well, we'd have to go on a whole different loom to make that, which we'd have to hand build, and that would cost us another $3 million. We're not doing that. So Christo said, so then what would we do? compromise our art. He said, I'm the one building the loom for the fabricators. I want to make sure it's exactly as I want it. So I don't want anybody paying for anything that we do because I want complete and total control. He also said, if I was born in the United States or not behind the Iron Curtain, I might feel very different. I might be getting a lot of grants and I might be interested in support. He said, but that's where I come from. He sells drawings to pay for all of it. Yes, and that's true, Kathleen. Everything comes back to building good relationships. Absolutely true. So true. So again, thanks to everyone for being here, and even more, thank you all for being part of this tribe in Praxis Center. Thank you for commenting on other artists' posts. I think it means everything to them. And as you know, when people comment on your posts and give you support, yeah, so I encourage you all to continue commenting and sharing the support and love you have, because that's how we all reach greater heights that may be outside our comfort zone. So thank you all for being here today. I really enjoyed talking with you and answering your questions. And I'll answer any other questions that are on there when I close this talk. So again, thank you all for being the great artist that you are, and again, for the love you're sharing in this group with each other, which is support in capital letters to me, and I really appreciate that, and I know that everyone else here also appreciates comments. We all do. So so thank you all, and look forward to hearing from you in the future.